Dear Jacinda, don't be weirded out by this letter. I know that you already keep a journal. It's hardly a massive leap to write yourself a letter. But let's be honest, your journal-keeping habits aren't the only oddity in the family. How many kids, for instance, could ever claim to come from a home with not one, but two microfiche readers? To be fair, that number would probably be about 25. That was, after all, how many other Mormons there were in Morrinsville. In a town of 5,000, that basically meant being out there on your own. Now, that would usually be fine, but if you happen to have been born into a religion that most people consider to be a cult, it can get interesting. Even at primary school, kids have already picked up your oddity. There are the jokes, although let's be fair, the one that Shannon told you in the school hall before violin lessons that time was pretty good. What's the difference between a Volvo and a Mormon? You can shut the door on a Mormon. To this day, I'm pretty sure Shannon didn't really know what a Mormon was, let alone the mechanical and industrial capabilities of the Volvo Car Corporation. But the jokes, even at your tender age of 11, probably say it all. Not that you are bullied or harassed for your religion, but you are and will continue to be defined by it. It will be the reason, for instance, that your friends will constantly allocate you the role of sober driver, or that your best friend will turn to you for answers when her brother commits suicide. You will be the studious, uncaffeinated, church-going organiser. Because after all, you've already been told how things are meant to pan out. Go to church, be a good person, and you'll be lucky enough to marry one of those clean-cut, lovely young returned missionaries. I know what you are thinking. Boys, gross. Be honest though, you have a crush on Richard Church, and the only way you knew how to show him, being the tomboy that you are, was to beat him at an arm wrestle. This won't be the first or last very average strategy you will deploy in the name of a crush. Sadly, some won't be deliberate. There's the Brian Bonner situation. I can feel you blush at the mere mention of his name. You were both in that play together. You had the role of Wicked Witch, which was pretty unfortunate, not least because of the quick costume changes that were required. I know you thought it was clever when you worked out at dress rehearsal that you could just wear your Scene 2 costume under your dress, until you ran backstage and, while talking with Brian Bonner, whipped off your dress to reveal absolutely nothing. Nada. Starkers, other than some rather embarrassing underwear. The response from Brian in that moment will probably still be replaying in your mind on a daily basis. After all, he did scream like you had just stabbed him in the eye with a 4-foot needle. Yes, it's fair to say you and boys will fail for many, many years to come. Now, I know you won't want that to matter. After all, there are all those random career aspirations to think about. At 11, you're probably up to job aspiration number 3 of about 40, veterinarian. Preceding that, of course, was clown, which your father will one day tell you have achieved via your political profession, in a classic dad joke. But if you feel like you are free to pick whatever career you can imagine, it's because mum and dad will never really mind what you do for a job as long as you have one. Dad will make that really clear when you get a job as a checkout operator at a supermarket. Your boss will hate you. Don't bother trying to figure out why. She just dislikes the world and you happen to be in it. Although your early union membership might be a feature. Either way, she will one day make her views known by declaring your nose stud a banned piece of attire. Don't be perturbed when you share your disquiet over the whole situation with your father in a rant, probably more fitting in scale for an anti-Springbok tour demonstration than a fence at a facial piercing. That's just the way you will be as an angsty teenager. Dad will do what he does best though, listening quietly before he declares something only your father would say. Jacinda, you are too poor to have principles. He will, of course, be right. But you already know, even at 11, that you sense and feel injustice everywhere, and I mean everywhere. It wasn't that long ago that you were listening to the radio and heard the lyrics of a Phil Collins song about a homeless girl and bawled your eyes out. Small tip, Phil Collins, it turns out, is a conservative twat, so no more tears, please. I can also tell you that the memory you have as a 5-year-old living in the Bay of Plenty town of Murupara of the little boy walking home from school by himself with no shoes on a cold day, diarrhea running down his leg and sobbing by himself, that image will stay with you forever. You want to help everyone, fix everything, you just haven't quite figured out that one day that might become your job. Because right now, if I asked you what you'll be doing when you are 30 or heaven forbid 35, I bet you will say this: I will be a mother. Mormons have no problem with working women, it's just not the priority. Kids, that's the priority. A people mover worth of them if you want. Why not? You'll start young enough, and even at the wee small age of 11, that is what you see for yourself. In fact, one of the most heated discussions you are going to have one day with Dad will end with him highlighting your extreme stubbornness by offering a killer blow. He will predict that you will be unmarried at 30. 30! Let's be clear, this in Mormon land was akin to declaring you a leper and expelling you from the island. By 30, most Mormon women are grandmothers and nearly menopausal through pure reproductive exhaustion. Unmarried, your father had declared you to be the Bridget Jones of the LDS church. But for all of the mockery, that, Jacinda, is what you imagine for yourself. And I did too for a long, long time. But things might just take a more complicated path. In fact, Laurel, your dear sweet mother, she's going to figure that out a lot sooner than you are. Spoiler alert. Your sister is going to get married at 18, much to the family's horror. And at that wedding, Mum will tell you in the most frank way, Jacinda, we spent $4,000 on Louise's wedding, so I've put the same amount aside for you when you get married. A few years later, she'll want to update the whereabouts of your dowry, explaining she had to use it for something else, but it would be put back ready and waiting for that mystical wedding. Then there will be a phone call when you're overseas, and by this time in your mid-20s. You know that money I put aside for your wedding? I've been thinking about it. I've decided to put it in long-term investment bonds. And finally, when you come back to New Zealand at age 28, having to start all over again, Mum will deliver the final killer blow. How about instead of giving you that wedding money, I just give you my Toyota Corolla? Your dowry will be a 1991 Toyota Corolla hatch. I know there will be a lot to absorb in all of that. The fact that your somewhat rebellious sister will get married so young that your mum will give you a car and that you will travel. You haven't even left the North Island, let alone New Zealand. The furthest you've been in a holiday is Opanoni, but your heart is set on going to one place, the United States. Dad went there that time and bought you a giant teddy bear, a brand new jacket, and cheese in a spray can. Like cream, but for cheese. Only magical places would make cheese like that. And of course, that is the place that all the Mormon missionaries come from. In fact, I know right now you've decided that the only way to get to America is to be a Mormon missionary too. Right now, though, Morrinsville will feel like a complete world to you, but you will leave it. And when you do, I want you to be ready for something. I want you to be ready to feel uncomfortable. I don't mean physically, although that will happen too. I mean be ready to feel guilty, regret, and responsibility all at the same time. The first time it will happen will be India. It will be only the third trip you ever take. You'll be 10 years older than you are now, and you'll think you're tough. You have a role in an international NGO that will take you a lot of places, but India will be the first time you will feel hopeless. Surrounded by what you feel like and more people living on the street than off them, you'll stare from the window at the YMCA for hours at a woman lying on the path who seems almost as if she isn't breathing while her child sits next to her. There will be a moment when you contemplate leaving your job in New Zealand and staying there just to do something. The next time will be Nepal when you visit a refugee camp full of people from Bhutan. You'll be surrounded by children who all want to try their English skills on you. They live on dirt floors, they eat ration food, and they are stuck. They will smile at you like you've bought them a room full of candy rather than a handful of ballpoint pens. And when you leave, you'll be confronted by a horrible thought. What if I'm not tough enough to stay and live on a dirt floor too? None of that will prepare you for the second refugee camp you'll visit though, Western Sahara. It will be a name you hear a lot when you become president of an international political youth NGO, and no, you didn't want to be president, but just roll with it. You won't even know where Western Sahara is right now, but I can promise you, when you jump on a plane in Algeria and head to a place called Tudenduf, in a plane where the seats aren't bolted down, you will kiss that sandy ground when you land. It will be the first time you experience 40-degree heat in what is meant to be winter. You'll cover yourself from head to toe, just like every woman in the camp, to protect yourself from the sun and stand. You spend nights in the desert where your guide will navigate by the stars, all the while thinking up ways to avoid eating camel again. In fact, you'll get offered 4 whole live camels as a dowry and be told proudly that they're worth at least $1,000 US a pop. Take that, Toyota Corolla. You'll be there to hear from refugees who have lived in that forgotten place for more than 30 years. They fled their homes when Morocco occupied their land and they've never returned. And while they live in camps, many will fear more for those who remain in the occupied territory, who face persecution and who periodically disappear. And one day you will sit in a room with young people who have managed to leave the camp, get university degrees, only return to the camp and wait, and you will cry. But here is the kicker. Just like India, just like the Bhutanese camp, they don't want you to say, they want you to do something else. No one will sum it up better than the head of the women's organisation in the camp in Western Sahara. She spoke to you in Arabic, one of 3 languages she knew. She smiled at you while the translator told you of her warm thanks for coming, her huge gratitude, all the while grabbing your hand and then saying, "But if you leave this place and forget us, we will never forgive you." And that is my message for you, Jacinda. You will go to each of these places thinking your job is to stay there, to help, to do something, but maybe doing something means leaving, means advocating for change, means trying to make your own country one that welcomes refugees with open arms for what they've experienced and for what they will bring to us, to be a global citizen, but at home. I guess all of that, in a way, is how you will eventually end up on a path that is not at all what you imagined for yourself, even though it was probably inevitable. In a little over 10 years' time, you will take on the hardest job you're ever likely to do as a political advisor for a woman called Helen Clark. She will terrify you, but you will love her. A campaign around civil unions will pop up and you'll throw yourself into helping, boots and all. Right now, you probably don't think you've ever met someone who is gay. Trust me, you have. In fact, your great uncle was jailed for it not too many decades ago. And while civil unions will be a campaign you believe in, your church will not. You will ignore the cognitive dissonance for a while because it will just feel easier to truck along. The thought of leaving will terrify you right up to the day that you do it. You'll feel like you're leaving your family, that you'll have to revisit the deaths of so many loved ones and question whether you really would ever see them again. And jeepers, you might never ever be the owner of a people mover. Leaving is not something that will seem possible, but it will happen. And here we are now, 35 years old, no husband, no kids, no religion, no cognitive dissonance. But the thing that you didn't really think about, that was totally instinctive, has turned out to be the most important and most consistent thing in your life: your love of people, your sense of responsibility to them wherever they may live in the world, and the belief that even in your own backyard you can make the world just a little bit better and a little bit more welcoming. The fact this is still the anchor in your life makes you the luckiest heathen I could have ever imagined. So hang in there. You may not get to eat canned cheese again, but everything else will all be worth it.